Hello, 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 hello.
There we go.
Check. Hey.
Check 1, 2. Okay, we apologize about that. We've literally been talking for a few minutes with no audio. Thank you, Julian, for giving us the heads up there, because I forgot to unmute the mic. Let's reverse a little bit. Let's go back to what we were talking about. So Randy here, coming off of a big win. That was about 5 weeks ago. It was up in Alamosa, Colorado. It's a town of just under 9,000 people. The guy that he was fighting is from that town. So, obviously, the crowd's very much for the opponent against Randy. But Randy, despite getting a headbutt to the eyeball there in the first minute of the first round, ends up winning by decision. Split decision, though. And you're saying that one of the judges gave him all 3 rounds when even he didn't think.
Yeah, there's no way that it could have happened that way. I ended up on top every round. I outstruck him. He never checked leg kicks, which is not smart.
Really?
Yeah, and by the end of the round, or the end of the third round, people asked me, "Did you notice his leg?"
Was it all red and swole?
It was not red. It was black.
Oof.
Black on the inside and purple on the outside. I kicked inside and outside leg kicks, would not check it. And so I know he was in pain that way. But he's a very honorable fighter. He was a black belt in judo, and I'm a brown belt in judo, and he kept trying to do throws, and I would counteract it, and he was a little frustrated on that. I would take him down. He tried to choke me a couple times and didn't have the choke right, and I would end up on top and get to beat him up some more.
Mm-hmm.
My eye bled everywhere. I was bled like a stuck the whole fight.
Yeah, man. Any cut up here will it pours blood. I got popped right here outside of a bar about 12 years ago. It took 11 stitches to close it up. But I mean, those things bleed and bleed and bleed, and they don't stop whatsoever. But what we were also getting into is that generally we'll like to talk about future fights, kind of think about things that we might need to set up. But the big fight coming up is this Saturday, tomorrow actually, UFC 232. And kind of the whole point is, I think there's going to be enough to talk about that. That will be kind of the gist of this MMA talk. So let's start with the biggest question of all, the fact that this fight was moved from Las Vegas to Los Angeles less than a week before the fight, and why that happened. Now, according to ESPN, so Jones is being tested very frequently because of his prior failed tests. I mean, his last fight that he had was against Cormier. That was a no contest because of things that popped up in his blood. Again, something popped up. It was the same thing that he tested positive for back in 2017. Now, the explanation that we have been given is that the USADA ruled that the amount of the substance indicates that Jones did not re-ingest the banned substance, and that it was most likely a residual amount from the same exposure that caused him to test positive back in 2017. Randy seems to have some problems with this explanation.
They have some amazing ways of testing if that's the case. Because if you get a drug, every drug that it'll go through your system, and it takes this amount of time to gestation time or whatever, and after that it's gone. Nothing just stays around and hangs there and hopes to, So I just don't see how they can test it. And that was from a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I mean, generally it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks it takes for something to, and that's for an extended period. There's a lot of things that'll be out of your system in just a few days. Yes. But yeah, so ultimately they ended up having to move the fight, and the reason for that was the Nevada Athletic Commission. Here's the thing: they didn't specifically say no. They didn't have time to hold a hearing to kind of bring on a judgment. Whereas in California, which is where the fight's going to take place, they said, well, we've already ruled on his previous test, which is the one from 2017, and we're willing to just accept the USADA's ruling that the amount that's in his blood is from that previous test. Like, this is just residual effects from that, which is why the fight was moved from Vegas to Los Angeles. Now, one of the bigger problems there is you have a lot of these fighters on the undercard don't make a lot of money. Right. They spend what little money they have to have friends and family and their team flown out to Las Vegas, and they got to change all of those plans. Have you ever had a venue change, even not even necessarily within a week, but a venue change at all in a scheduled fight?
No.
Like it's always been locked down.
Yeah, once you get most most venues, other than like UFC's a big name and get big money and all that, they can jump a little bit easier. But if you're in New Mexico and you're going to get a fight in New Mexico, it's not going to move to Arizona because you have to do different commissions completely. You got to go to the commission, say, hey, I plan on doing this fight in now, and they go, okay, we have enough people for that, and we can have our DIs, we have all these stuff set up. And if you just move it, they go, no.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually had one where they had to cancel because the venue said we had some problems. Back in Alamogordo, they had some problems at the venue, and they had a security breach or whatever, and they said, we're not going to have, at the base, sorry. And so they said, we're not going to have these people come in. So they called up the commission, said, hey, can we have it in Las Cruces instead? Can we move it? And the commission's like, no. You can either cancel it or have it where you say.
So you were locked in where it was going to happen at that moment. It's one of those situations that it seems really like, I don't know, like I'm starting to wonder if this would have happened because remember the UFC has canceled fights at the last minute as well because of certain issues. But this one being the final one of 2018, John Bones Jones getting back into the octagon against Alexander Gustafsson, the guy who, a lot of people say beat him. Yeah. Randy being one of those who's, saying, he feels that Gustafsson won that first fight between the two. It's one of those situations that, do you think that they would have done this for another fighter? I mean, there are some guys out there that you could think, yeah, they probably would. Like,
yeah, I could say
the big names
Conor
in the sport.
McGregor would probably be one that they would do something like that for, or
like if they had a McGregor Khabib 2, like that one, if they had a locked in, they would probably do whatever they could to ensure that fight was going to happen. Because Lord knows when McGregor might end up in prison. So, I mean, you got to get those fights in when you can. And I'm still waiting for the second one of that series to end up popping up there. But so the fight's been moved to Los Angeles. Some of the fighters weren't happy about it. Obviously, some of the lesser known guys and people on the undercard who are really, you kind of scrape by because the discrepancy between, what Jones and Gustafsson are going to make to the very first fight is drastic. Like, it's very, very drastic.
From like $3,000 for the low end guys for the winners of the low end guys to 6 digits. Difference. It's crazy.
Well, and the interesting thing too is when you talk about some of those lower end guys, people were like, "Oh, well, you just made $3,000. Let's say it goes the full 3 rounds for 15 minutes." That's not the case. You're talking about all the prep time, the training time. You're talking about months of work.
Yeah, even if you did 6 weeks of training, 3 grand is nothing. And then on top of that, if I go out there and you're my corner, they'll give you a shirt that says McCarty on it, and they'll take it out of my purse. So it's like government rates. It's not a discount rate. We don't get it at the cost of whatever it is. We have to pay for it anyway. So it's $3,000 gross, not net.
Yeah.
And it's like, what in the world? I don't like that. That's horrible.
Well, yeah, and so that's the thing, especially for these guys who are on this undercard. But one of the fighters had said, and this is in the article from ESPN where it's talking about the fighters and what they have to go through, and as far as the actual preparations for the fight, not a whole lot's changed when it's this close. The only things that really has changed is scheduling the doctor's appointments and things like that to have blood work done and have all the doctor's exams prior to the fight. It's probably going to be changing venues at that point. But one of the fighters, the bantamweight Brian Keller, he wrote that we should all say no, see what happens. Then again, we're all trying to make a paycheck and pay our bills, so we can't risk it. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing where the UFC will wield that power and they hold that power where they can kind of do whatever they want because these fighters are at their mercy. They're doing something that they love. They're doing something that they want to do, and they're kind of they have to go with the flow, and they don't wield any power when it comes to making decisions like that. Bigger fighters like a John Bones Jones or a Conor McGregor might, now that we have other organizations like Bellator that have gotten bigger, although the one that De La Hoya is trying to get going, I don't think that one's going very far. Holy crap! Did you see the Tito Ortiz?
Yeah,
Chuck. Like how old? Like
he was weathered. Like it was amazing to watch how the Iceman was not the Iceman.
Yeah, like he just looked old and slow.
He was. He wasn't, and whoever was around him, like I was saying, his camp should have told him no.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking into it. 2 camps told him no.
Really?
He went to the 3rd camp to go. I'm fighting. I'm going to.
So
do
2
this.
camps said, like, look,
That's
this is not for you.
Yeah, it's past your time, and it hurt his feelings, and so he went to the next one. It would hurt my feelings. I don't want people to tell me it's past my time, but sooner or later.
Would you do that?
No.
So, if, like, let's say you're at your first camp, and they say, look, Randy, like, we're training with you, and like, it's you're past it at this point. Like, fighting's not in the cards for you anymore.
It hurts your feelings, but but realistically, you have to trust the people that are training you, and if you can't trust them, especially like he's been in the same camp forever, for his entire career,
Mm-hmm.
and if they're saying it's not a good idea, it's not what you should do, he should trust that, even
Mm-hmm.
though it hurts. I've had.
Do you think that's pride? Just not allowing him
positive.
to.
Yeah, to me it is, because inside your head you have fights, you have lots
Mm-hmm.
of stuff left. I got a lot left, but I've had where I got offered a fight in Canada, and it was $6,000 to fight, and for me that's a lot of money for a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed it to my coach. I was like, "Hey, check this out." And I was, "Oh, that's great. Let's find out about this." Started looking it up, and he goes, "No." Like he doesn't play around, and I like that,
Mm-hmm.
because then I don't have to guess. He's
straightforward. He's going to tell you
goes,
exactly what he thinks.
This guy was a Olympic alternate. He's 6'8", and he hits people, and they go to sleep. Like
Yeah.
he's just going boom, and they go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, it's not worth $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
Ask him for 12.
And then maybe we'll think about it.
Start looking at how could we beat this guy,
Mm-hmm.
because my normal game plan against a guy that's a lot bigger than me would not work with him.
Mm-hmm.
I can't take the punches of his, like, and I hate hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
I hate hearing I can't do this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, let's see. But at the same time,
That's how you end up going to sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
So I take it you did not take the
I did
fight.
not
They
take
did not.
that
They
fight.
did not bump it up to $12,000.
No, I didn't even offer it to him. I just I believe my coach. I gotta trust that what they're gonna say to me
Is in your
for my
best interest.
Even though they're still training me, getting me ready for fights.
Mm-hmm.
Not all fights are for me,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. Even though I think they are.
Have you ever come up into any other situations like that where you've looked at something either stylistically or size-wise and just thought, like, that one, okay, this one's not for me?
I haven't.
Or is that the only? Or is that? Okay, has any of the coaches So have there been other scenarios like that where it's very similar to that, where they're like, no, like this one's one you want to pass on?
Yes, I've had like 4 fights that I've actually turned down because my coaches said I was not ready for that. Even though I feel I can be ready for it, let's figure out a way to win. And they're like, no. Okay.
Like you don't have the time, but in your own head you're like, no, we can do this. But that's the competitive spirit, and that's
right.
That's what you.
That's why I have to have people.
Number one thing you need to have to be able to step in and compete is that you have to be willing to say that. But that's also why you need to have a good coaching staff around you, because then they can tell you, no, this is probably not the best idea for you. Another fight will come up. Let's take that one.
But anytime my coach offers me a fight, hey Randy, I have this fight they want for you, I've never said no. Mm-hmm. I've taken fights literally on the day of the weigh-in. So they said, hey, there's a fight for you. I'd like you to fight this guy. Can you do it? Yeah. When is it? Weigh-ins are today. Let's go. Where are they at?
Did you make weight?
And I made weight. And I won. So I mean, if they give me a fight, I'll take the fight. That's just how I am. But if I show them the fight, hey, they offered me this fight, and they say yes, I've taken it. If they say no, I don't. I have to trust them. And I think he should have listened to that too. Yeah, you beat Tito twice. Why are you
leave it at that? You don't have to prove it a third time. I also think that a lot of that had to do not only his just competitive spirit, but his anger and hatred towards Tito Ortiz. I mean, they obviously. So if you followed their careers at all, you know that they were both coaches on The Ultimate Fighter, and they were scheduled to fight a third time, and that one got canceled because Tito, I think, went in for neck surgery, and Liddell was pissed. Yeah. They showed this on the show.
They used to be training partners too before that.
And Liddell came in and he's yelling at Dana where he's like, I told you he was going to do this. Yeah. I told you he was going to back out. I don't know why you booked the fight. He was pissed. And I got a feeling a lot of that was still just brewing inside of him, that like he's got like he needs to get that anger out and unleash it on Ortiz, and unfortunately he took the brunt end on that.
He wouldn't unleash, so he was pushing his hand out as he was walking back, and on his jabs is like, what are you doing? Like, never seen you back away from punches like this.
Have you seen like old man fights on YouTube? That's truly what it looked like. Yeah. I mean, there's these fights where a couple of old guys are scrapping and one of them happens to fall over and you might chuckle a little bit because it's just angry, drunk old guys. Yeah. That's what this fight looked like. I mean, it was sad. Yeah. And then, of course, this led to the whole Dana White versus Oscar De La Hoya feud. And we'll get into that here, later because, the boxing match has been challenged and everything else. And we'll get into that on the next MMA talk. But for now, let's get into UFC 232. Yeah. One of the first fights, you got Andrei Arlovski returning to the octagon. Things have not gone well recently for Arlovski. He defeated Frank Mir back in 2015. Now, Arlovski, one of those very active fighters. Like, he's one of those guys, like, if you're going to offer him a fight, he's going to take it. He was at 25-10 at that time. He then proceeded to lose the next 5 fights, starting with Stipe Miocic, Alistair Overeem, Josh Barnett, Francis Ngannou, and Marcin Tybura. 5 losses in a row. Arlovski came back, won a couple, but he's now coming off of 2 losses in a row, and he is going to be taking on a gentleman by the name of Walt Harris, who's 11-7. If you just look at the records of these two, and you kind of look at what they've done recently, you can be like, okay, these seem to be 2 guys that just don't really have a lot to offer, which could mean it's going to be an exciting fight. Because sometimes you see that where it's like, oh, like I'm not really excited for this one. Like, perfect examples on the flip side. The fight that you had between Ngannou and the guy that Cormier just beat for the heavyweight title. And his name, I'm blanking on his name right now. But these guys were 2 heavy hitters. Like, they're known to throw leather and they're known to just knock people out silly. And they had, I believe, the least amount of punches thrown and landed in a fight in the UFC.
Was it Alistair Overeem?
No, it wasn't Overeem. Let me look it up really quick. But so as far as Arlovski goes, do you think if he loses this fight, it's time to call her quits?
Well, I think that's what's happening right now. In my opinion, I don't know what's going behind the scenes with the UFC or anything, but sometimes we get fights that they go over there and say, if you don't win, you're out before the fight. And so these guys have that on their as their pressure. And UFC's even said we use that pressure to our advantage. People that should step up, and they want to stay here, they step up.
And I mean, I don't think that's a terrible tactic for the UFC because that will push the fight even more so that we avoid things. It was Derek Lewis, by the way.
Oh, Derek.
So it was Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou. And that fight was awful. The whole time you're watching Joe Rogan sitting there saying, this is one of the worst fights I've ever seen. And UFC can utilize that, hey, if you lose this, you're out, sort of threat to force people to not do that. Now, of course, this Ngannou-Lewis fight was designed to be kind of a next man up to face Cormier for the heavyweight title, so they really couldn't do that. But, man, that thing backfired, and that was an awful fight to watch. But you are looking at Arlovski here, who has lost 7 of his last 9 fights. So right now he's currently sitting at 27-17 on his career. And Arlovski, not ancient, on the older spectrum. I don't want to say too ancient because I think Randy's actually a year older than him. Yeah. But Arlovski's 39.
He's 5 years younger than me.
Oh my God, Randy's so old.
Whatever. I have more wins than him.
He's not, on the older spectrum. But do you think it's one of those things that maybe he's one of those fighters that he's taken so many fights so frequently it just wears your body more? It's kind of like looking at a running back in the NFL, and you can have a running back at age 30 or 29 and have fresher legs than somebody who is 27, because the guy maybe who's 27 was that guy who gets 30 carries a game and he's just getting beat up and beat up and beat up. And then you have a guy like Arlovski who has just a ton of fights, and he's just, he's only 39, but maybe his body is just starting to say, like, look, like, we can't take this anymore.
Well, that's just professional MMA fights. That has nothing to do with kickboxing, with
yeah, this is
it's professional fights.
44 professional fights. That's it.
Right.
So that's not including amateur fights or anything like
or
that.
anything other than MMA. Because I have 6 boxing matches that never comes up with my 20 MMA fights.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just doesn't. But the other way around, when I go to boxing, they go, well, you only have 6 fights. Yeah, but I have 20 MMA fights.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but they can't take that into context whenever we're going to fight. When I try to ask for more rounds and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to make you pick or unless you want to. So you got Orlovsky and what the hell was the other guy? This guy I don't even know. Walt Harris.
Walt Harris is actually a beast. He's a dangerous.
You going with Harris?
I'm going to go with Harris. Unfortunately, I like Orlovsky. I've met him a few times. I'm not personally close to him.
Like you can't like call him up right now.
Right. But
how you do, comrade? He's Wreck-It Randy.
I like that he fights off of his emotion, and his emotion hasn't been there lately. He's just been kind of like nonchalant.
Yeah, I was gonna say a little bit too nonchalant. And if you got a fighter who feeds off of energy, and when they come out like that, like flat, that's a recipe for disaster for him.
So unfortunately, I think he's not gonna win.
All right, so Wreck-It Randy first pick. He's got Walt Harris taking down Andrei Arlovsky. The next fight I want to talk about here, you've got Carlos Condit taking on Michael Chiesa. Both of these guys, at one point, very, very promising careers, have kind of hit the skids a little bit. Condit more than Chiesa. Condit, he's looking at 4 consecutive losses. He's also lost 7 of 9, just like Arlovsky. I remember we interviewed Condit on the air when I first moved here to El Paso, and I believe it was right before he took on Thiago Alves, and he got a victory in that one. But since then, he's got 4 straight losses, starting with the loss to Robbie Lawler and Damian Maya. But then on the flip side, you got Michael Chiesa, who he's coming off a pair of losses, the most recent one to Anthony Pettis. So looking at this fight, which way are you going? Carlos Condit?
Yeah.
Michael Chiesa?
Carlos Condit. Stylistically, Chiesa's not in the same type of stylistic realm as Condit.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, he's set up for him. There's sometimes you have fighters that play good into your intentions, and then other ones won't.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Condit's a bad man.
So does this one actually play better to Condit?
Yeah,
in my opinion. Do you think this one might have almost been booked by the UFC a little bit to be like, hey, Condit was kind of a big name. He was doing well. Like let's kind of set him up for something, but let's also pick somebody that people know the name Michael Chiesa.
And he's a tough dude. I'm not taking anything away from Chiesa, but you have to look at who he's fighting. Like when he fought Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis is an exciting fighter, and he moves really well. And Chiesa's more of, I'm going to stand in the middle and bang with you, or I'm going to wrestle you to the ground and beat you up. He doesn't have the flash, and I think Condit's going to win this fight. I think so.
So we got Walt Harris, Carlos Condit. Now, the 2 big ones. This is what we're going to get into. This is why I'm super excited. And chances are I'm going to get busy on Saturday and not be able to watch the damn fights live. But so we have Amanda Nunes taking on Chris Cyborg. Cyborg, she basically, for all intents and purposes, perfect in mixed martial arts outside of her first fight. I mean, she lost that one. It's been a run ever since then. But she too, just like John Bones Jones, been kind of plagued with PED. Failed drug tests, and obviously when people see her, she looks like the person like, oh, it's a dude. Oh no, that's actually a chick. But I mean, she is, like you're saying, she's a beast. She's an absolute monster. And Amanda Nunes, who, she's coming off of a lot of wins. She's, I just rewatched that fight where she knocked out Rousey, and I mean that one wasn't even close. But then again, like some of that fight had to do with like somebody kept telling Ronda Rousey that she could throw with Nunes, and that's not the case. I mean, when you watch that fight, she was slow. She had 0 head movement, and it was more or less like, I'm going to stand here, and then maybe I get one in, and I can get her in a clinch, and I can get her and take her down, which was what Ronda Rousey's, that was her pattern consistently. Yeah. And she wasn't able to do that against the 2 people at the very end that took her down, in Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes. And people are saying that for Cyborg, this is kind of the fight that will truly put her up into that pantheon of she is this hands down the greatest female fighter. Do you give Nunes a chance?
Yes.
Like a solid chance, or like how, like if you're looking on a scale, like how far would it be leaning either way? Like, is it, yes, I do give Nunes a chance, but I really think Cyborg is going to dominate her? Or do you think like, no, like this is almost 50-50 and Nunes is
I wouldn't
no
say
joke
50-50. I would probably say like 35-65 type thing.
Okay.
Not exactly 70-30, but Amanda Nunes is dangerous. Really, a lot more dangerous than most people think. But Cyborg is, I'm kind of torn. Cyborg is an amazing athlete. I met her. She went to one of my fights up in Colorado when she was training up there. Joseph Benavidez says, hey, "You're fine. Oh, the reason you're up here is because you're in the fight." Yeah, and he's like, "We're gonna go to it." And so he told everybody, "Hey, anybody who wants to go, I'm going to the fight." And she's one of the ones who went to the fight. And she wrote me on Instagram, all that. I was like, that's kind of cool. You know, I get all fan geeked and stuff too. But
there's nothing wrong with that.
But she's a cool chick that's like, to me, she's very solid. She has a great chance of winning. It's a much higher chance. But Amanda's still dangerous, and if you put two dangerous world champions together,
anything can happen.
Yeah.
So if like, okay, first of all, give me your pick. Who do you think would, like, who are you predicting?
I would say that Amanda's going to lose.
So you pick, so Cyborg is the winner. Now, on the flip side here, let's say Nunes gets the win. What kind of strategy? How do you see her winning the fight if she would win it? Do you think it's going to be a stand-up, like she's going to have to knock her out, or do you think she's going to have to take her down?
I think she needs to have to change it up. People either try and stand with Cyborg or try and take her down. They don't do both.
Mm-hmm.
And she needs to be strike, take her to the ground, beat her up, stand back up, strike, take her down, and just keep doing that up and down stuff. And I think that'll wear Cyborg out in a different way than anybody's ever messed with her. Because she can handle the ground game. She's solid on the ground. She's also great on stand-up. Everybody sees that. But the transitions is the worst part of the fight. And if you can do that to somebody enough that they're exhausted, you can win.
Okay. So, all right. So you're picking Cyborg, but you definitely see a way that Nunes can win the fight.
Right.
All right. So the big one, the final one, we got Johnny Bones Jones taking on Alexander Gustafsson. This was the fight. They fought back in, what year was that?
16.
That was 2013.
13.
Actually.
Wow.
And that was when, let me see here. So
it was in his hometown, too. Gustafsson's hometown.
Up in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, it was in Canada. Okay.
It was in Canada.
Canada.
So John Jones won that one. That was one that went to decision, and it was for the light heavyweight championship. Randy, one of the people who truly believe, like Alexander Gustafsson, won that fight. If I were to say two, I would lean towards, I think Gustafsson won that fight as well. But it was one of those ones that's so close, you can't fault a judge for giving it to John Bones Jones. Like you can't do that. It's not like some of these other fights where it's clear and present, like this dude won the fight, and for some reason the judge scores it a completely opposite way. But you're talking about Gustafsson and Bones Jones here. Both have not fought in a while. The last fight for Jones was back in July of 2017, and for Gustafsson, it was May of 2017. That was his victory over Glover Teixeira. He does have a couple of victories in a row, but Gustafsson did lose to Anthony Johnson back in 2015, the beginning of it, and then he also lost to Cormier at kind of towards the end. It was October of 2015. So the long layoff, both fighters know each other well enough, I guess. What do you see in this fight? Like, what do you see happening?
Well, I see John Jones being a little rusty, like he was his first time coming back the last time. This, you look at, I was leaning in to look at his, and between Cormier and Wowski, or however you say his name, it was over a year, or close to a year. And then another year before the next one, or half a year, 6 months. And he's sharp, super sharp, even though he has 1 to 2 fights a year. That's him, but Jones needs to stay in there to stay unrusty, so he's going to be second guessing some of his stuff, in my opinion. And then there's not going to be any feeling out process because both of them have already fought for 25 minutes with each other. I've only had one rematch, and I loved it.
Yeah.
Because I went out there and I knew exactly what the guy was going to do, and he did that.
Like clockwork. Like, oh, he's going to do this,
like,
do this, going to do
so
this.
I was able to pick. I beat him the first time. He asked me for a rematch, and I accepted. And in 6 months, he didn't change anything. It's hard to change a lot in 6 months anyway, but he didn't change anything, and I was able to win because of it.
Mm-hmm.
He's a tough fighter, respectable fighter, but still, Jones is going to be rusty like he did the last time he came in. He was ugly, man. Like if Cormier would have fought him right off of his layoff,
Cormier would have
won
that one.
And I think that Jones is Cormier's Achilles heel.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have beat him in that. But then he gave that one fight, sharpened him up enough to get him to
when he was able to defeat Cormier in the next fight, which ultimately that one was a no contest because he got pinged for PEDs. Bones Jones did. Okay, so for this final fight, what's your prediction? Who do you got winning?
Gus. It's going to be a tough fight. I don't think it'll be stopped. I think it'll go all 25 minutes, but I think it'll be Gustafsson winning.
There you go. So we've got so real quick recap on Randy's picks. He's got Walt Harris taking down Andrei Arlovski. Carlos Condit taking down Michael Chiesa. You're leaning towards Cyborg beating Nunes, but could very easily see Nunes winning this fight. I really like Nunes. I think she's really exciting to watch.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the fights in general.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar enough with Walt Harris. You say the guy's a beast, so I can't really pick that fight because I'm only more familiar with Arlovski.
Yeah.
But I think if I were picking two, I would pick Carlos Condit as well. More of the fanboy would be coming out in me saying that I would pick Nunes to beat Cyborg just because I think it is close enough to where my rooting interest would take over as I hope she wins. Yeah. And it's nothing against Cyborg. It's just that I think Nunes is a very exciting fighter to watch. And then in regards to the final fight, I too am going to have to go with Gustafsson. But that also has more of the fanboy there where it has to do with I enjoy I'm a bigger fan of Gustafsson, and I really don't like John Bones Jones. Yeah, but I was telling Randy this before we started the live stream here, was that when it came to Johnny Bones Jones, he's willing to play the villain. This is something I kind of covered in the MMA talk I did with Isaac a few weeks ago. Is that he's willing to be the villain, he's willing to be the bad guy. And I respect that, and I like that. But again, he's the bad guy. I mean, there's bad guys that I'll root for. There's bad guys that they play the heel, or that they're people just dislike in general, and I'm willing to root for some of those guys. I cannot root for John Bones Jones, but I at least respect the fact that he's willing to be the bad guy, and he plays into it, and he doesn't have any problem with the people who talk trash about him because of that, and I will always respect that. But I'm hoping that Gustafsson comes away with the victory here.
I have one last question for you. What do you think about BJ Penn fighting in this card?
I totally forgot that one was there.
BJ Penn against Ryan Hall.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean,
Ryan Hall's 6-1 and BJ Penn's 16-12-2.
My gut tells me, and I'm not familiar with Ryan Hall, but my gut tells me that BJ is not going to be in shape. Yeah. I mean, that's always been his biggest issue. The guy was so naturally gifted, is that his biggest thing was always just putting in the effort, putting in the work. I did get to I wasn't on the podcast he was on, but some friends, they do the Drinking Bros podcast, like Rocco, who's on My Ends MC, used to live here in El Paso, and Matt Best and JT and all those guys. They did a bunch of stuff with us here at the radio station. This was a couple of years ago when they all still lived here in El Paso. And I went out and did one of their podcasts with them, of the Drinking Bros podcast. And as I was sitting there filming it, they did it in JT's garage. And as we're filming it, all of a sudden I'm sitting there, and then BJ Penn walked in. And I was like, I didn't want to disrupt the podcast, because they were recording that one, and then they were going to record one with BJ right after. And the whole time, I wanted to react to it, but I couldn't. Because it would just sound really weird on whenever it would pop up next. So I didn't. But I mean, it was really cool seeing BJ Penn walk in there. Yeah. And I love BJ Penn. He's always been super exciting to watch fight. But I don't trust his conditioning. I don't trust that he has put in the work, because he's one of those guys that's been so naturally gifted, and he was able to win early on based on his talent alone, that when he finally started to have to put in the work, it showed that he wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for him. Like, I hope he wins.
Me too.
But I don't see the conditioning quite being there for him. So, but there you go. UFC 232. It's coming up on Saturday. In regards to KLAQ and the Buzz Adams Morning Show and all that fun stuff, everybody is off next week. Buzz, Lisa, and Joanna, they're all off on vacation, so it's just me. So we'll be running best of next week. I get to relive some of the funnier moments, like me eating a fish paste donut, which Randy thought was hilarious this morning. But yeah, so we'll cover that stuff. Hopefully after Buzz, we'll be back next Wednesday. We didn't do it this week because I was still feeling sick. So next Wednesday, we should be back at 10:30 Mountain Time right here on the KLAQ YouTube channel. Randy working on some fights, but can't really talk about anything yet because nothing's signed. But he is working on some future fights, coming off that big victory up in the nice small little town in Colorado. Anything else you want to cover before we wrap this bad boy up?
No. Thank you guys for letting us come in.
On that note, check you out, suckers.